Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're with Justin McNamara, who's going to talk to us about lithium-ion battery fires. As you heard, today's presentation is being recorded. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Any technical difficulties, try leaving and coming back again. I'm afraid hands up because the number of people we have, I won't be able to find you. So keep any questions in the chat and I will bring them back at the end. Just a reminder, any of the views in the presentation are that of the presenter and not the IFB. Okay, Justin, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And hi, everybody. I'm just going to turn my camera off while I share my screen so that I don't distract myself. Just bear with me 1 second. So I'm hoping that that's visible. It certainly shows that it is at my end. Yes, good afternoon. My name is Justin McNamara. I work for a company called Extralis. It's actually owned by Honeywell. I've been in the fire industry for over 30 years now, 23 of them with Extralis. We're perhaps best known for the invention and promotion of VESDA, very early smoke detection technology. I've done a variety of sales management, business development roles over particularly the last 23 years, but the last year I have focused on lithium-ion batteries and promoting a technology we call line tamer, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about this afternoon. And forgive the pun, I'll try and make it my last one. It is obviously a very hot topic. My agenda today is just to set the scene a little bit for the market. We'll talk a little bit about the various applications that lithium-ion batteries appear in. We'll then look at some of the reasons for failure. I'll just remind everybody how dangerous they can be with a short video, but I do not want anybody to get the impression that I am against lithium-ion batteries. They're absolutely fantastic in a whole variety of applications. We just have to be aware of the limitations and the potential pitfalls, and technologies, whether it's my own or others, are available today to help mitigate against fires, explosions, other things. And I think we're duty bound to at least discuss the issue, if not promote the technologies before perhaps the standards and regulations catch up. I'll obviously talk about the line.
Sorry, Justin, could I just jump in? Apologies, don't mean to talk over you, but a few of the guys are asking if you can put it on the slideshow bit, because currently it's not showing a very large screen, so it's not the full presentation. Perfect, thank you.
I'm hoping that's better. Sorry, I do apologise. I thought I'd done that. Then I'll obviously introduce the line tamer product, talk a little bit about how it works, show you a couple of generic examples. We'll talk about third-party reports, and I'll also cover regulation or lack thereof at that point. I'll have a little bit of a mini review at that point. I'll also then point you towards documentation that's available. I will finish my slide deck with a few slides on competitive testing, so hopefully you will have the idea of what types of technology can do and how they can help. And I'm hoping that if I manage to do that in about half an hour, it'll leave plenty of time to cover questions and answers. I've certainly found over the last 18 months that because it's such an interesting and perhaps relatively new topic, there are plenty of questions. The starting point for my journey and indeed Extralis's journey in this area was the rapid rise of energy storage. I will talk about some other applications, and I guess one or two more will appear in the questions and answers. But energy storage, also commonly known as BESS, battery energy storage systems, are growing massively across the globe. This is a chart here from a Bloomberg report, and if I pick, you might not be able to see it very well on the screen, but this is 2022 here, and where we currently think we are in terms of energy stored in these batteries, typically in shipping containers. If you look at the projected growth, that astonishing curve upwards over the next 7 years, and there are some who think this might be an actual underestimation. By any measure, we're going to have huge amounts of battery storage across the globe, and that obviously includes for us in the UK. What we've also noticed quite strongly over the last 12 months or so is the rise, as yet not quite as dramatic, but the dramatic rise of lithium ion cells in data centers in the UPS. And that is, you know, a market that again is going to dramatically increase over the next several years to a decade or so. Something else that you may have picked up on, the supply chain for these lithium-ion batteries currently, it mostly centers around China and the Far East. But what we're seeing now is projections for these huge, great battery manufacturing plants pretty much in every country throughout Europe, and also in the States as well. A really big business growing. Well, I did read a report yesterday that said of the 300 or so of these massive, several football size factories, over 200 of them will still be built in China. So we've perhaps got some way to go yet to get there. But you can see here on this map that, you know, we are going to start to produce the batteries that get used in all sorts of applications. So it may be that the vast majority are used in electric vehicles, but a lot of them are going to be used in the energy storage industry. A lot of them will be used in data centers, and the list of potential applications for lithium-ion batteries is pretty endless. And I know I haven't referenced it here, but I know that we can cover it in questions. Obviously, one of the applications that is certainly close to my heart, and possibly to many of you as well, is car parks. And it's something that we as a team have been looking at very closely over the last few months, and I will touch on that in the questions, no doubt. Stressing again, lithium-ion batteries do an absolutely fantastic job, and they are here to stay. It's an inexorable rise. It is not going to slow down. It's not going to get stopped. But unfortunately, we have had, it's rather a euphemistic term, but we've had instances, severe fires to explosions across the globe. And, you know, it's not uncommon for 2 or 3 significant instances to occur each month. I've started to use an independent website. I've referenced it at the bottom of the slide here. It's the Energy Power Research Institute. It's actually an American organization, but they are collating instances of significant lithium-ion fires across the globe, so that we have a kind of global database to track the instances and the fallout from them. And in fact, we've had one significant one recently, which I think is still going on. It's ongoing in the States, and a couple more last week in South Korea. So we're not yet at the stage where we've got this technology and all that surrounds it around it to a safe point. And I perhaps won't spend any more time referencing these explosions. I can provide you with a link, or you can independently search for it. The one that's perhaps most studied, and probably the one that's most commonly spoken about, is an explosion at the Arizona Public Service Facility in Surprise in the States. It occurred getting on for 3 years ago now, just over 3 years ago now. And it's been studied. There's lots of independent data to summarize to people what occurred, why, and maybe the lessons that can be learned. Very sadly, in that incident, there were 8 firefighters injured. But the reason for referencing it is that a lot of the lessons learned have been incorporated into future and other installations, but sadly not in every case. And it's part of the reason why we are still far too regularly getting fires and beyond to explosion with particularly these battery energy storage facilities. What I'd just do at this point is, you perhaps will be familiar, you'll have seen lithium ion batteries under stress going into thermal runaway and perhaps causing explosion. If you Google search, you'll see electric vehicles, buses. Recently, I think we saw an instance in Paris just last week. You'll see electric scooters doing similar things. Never mind these very large BESS type installations. But what I thought I'd do is just show you a very, very quick, deliberately contrived test. This is a small battery housed in a steel container or a metal container, surrounded by 3 short, small concrete walls. This is deliberate. And it happens very fast because we put this battery through a very quick overcharge. But it's just to, if you haven't seen it, just to make sure you understand the power, in not necessarily a good sense, the power that these batteries have if they're put under too much stress. So I'll just very quickly show this video. So just to illustrate the idea that, a battery that's put under too much stress, whether it be overcharge, as there was in this case, whether it's temperature deficiency in the battery, the thermal runaway can happen extremely quickly and things can get out of hand. Usually, typically, the runaway will not occur that quickly. It can, obviously, under certain conditions, but more often than not, there is an early indication, a window of opportunity to perhaps pull the battery back, to stop charging it, to maybe cool it down, and stop the battery reaching that thermal runaway point. And that's something I will talk about in just a moment. This, if you like, is my introductory slide to being able to intervene in the early stage of a lithium ion battery venting. It is under stress of some kind. For my purposes, I'm going to assume that it's either temperature or overcharge related. When it starts to vent, the battery will release what are known as battery electrolyte solvent vapors. They typically can be things like diethanol carbonate, diamethane carbonate, and that's what this orange line, forgive me, is meant to represent. In this early stage of a battery under stress, it will release these electrolyte solvent vapors in quite significant quantities. But at that stage, while the battery is venting, there's very, very limited, or in fact no, emission of things like CO or hydrogen, which I think is almost a common misconception, that people believe that those gases are released at that early stage of a typical cell venting. Obviously, over time, as the battery continues venting, we will start to see release of those more traditional gases. So I'm going to reference again CO, hydrogen. We'll see those increase in ratio as the electrolyte solvent vapors begin to decrease. And then if nothing is done, if there's no check or stop of, let's say, charging that battery, we'll reach that thermal runaway point, and by that time it is too late. The battery is lost. It is liable to explode and cause further damage. And that really is my value proposition. That is the benefit of the Lion Tamer. I want to take a little bit of time just to show you the technology without going into great detail. It's quite a simple concept. The technology was actually developed nearly a decade ago by a small American company called Nexaris, who are still the manufacturers of this technology. They developed it for the American government, for the American Navy. And a lot of that original tender and that original research work is still kept private, and I can't get access to it. But something obviously happened in something associated with the US Navy, and they put out a tender for technology companies to develop any technology that could sense and predict early enough the failure of lithium-ion batteries. So that was nearly 10 years ago. So it's not new technology. Obviously, it's been upgraded and updated, certainly over the last 5 years, to get to the point where we are today, where we have a controller, which is this item here. There's a front view of it here, and a view at the back of it here. Quite a simple looking device, and forgive me, I like simple looking. I like the intelligence to be in the electronics and in the sensing head. So into this controller, we will insert up to 12 monitoring sensors. This is a small view here of a monitoring sensor. This is an actual monitoring sensor. It is it's a chip inside it that provides the real intelligence, and that chip is sensing for this battery electrolyte solvent vapor. You'll notice here I also have something called a reference sensor, and then 3 different colored ports at the back of this controller. I'll talk about reference sensing on my next slide, and I will show you a typical generic design, which we can hopefully use as a basis to imagine different applications I don't want you to think that this technology is only used in these battery energy storage facilities, this container-like picture that I have here. This is just to give you an idea. I'll talk about documentation later, but we do have a design guide covering different applications where lithium-ion cells are incorporated, and we talk about the different design philosophies that we can use. This is just to give you an idea of one application. So here we have a typical container of batteries. We're showing 30 racks of batteries. I've indicated the monitoring sensors with these purple dots here, and typically, but not always, typically we will position a monitoring sensor in every other rack, as shown here. Very importantly, we have 6 reference sensors positioned at the entry and exit points to this container, and also in the HVAC points at either end of this container. Now, the reference sensors will do a very, very important job. They will guard against false positives. So we will not get external sources and false alarms from outside that aren't part of the environment that we're sensing for that very important electrolyte solvent vapor. And then obviously what I do is connect up my monitoring sensors and my reference sensors to my controller, or like 2 controllers as we have in this particular case, and then this output signals, and there are a variety of connection options for the line tamer controller, either via Modbus or simple Form C relay connections or digital outputs. We will connect those into another system that will perform the required actions. It may be to the battery management system to shut the charging down, and that certainly would be my strong recommendation if there is an alarm, an indication from a line tamer monitoring sensor. A point of note that I've added fairly recently to this particular slide is the lifetime of the sensors. It's a common and very understandable misconception to think that electrolyte solvent vapor sensors are similar in nature to what we would all particularly understand as gas sensors. They're not really. The line tamer sensors have a minimum 10-year service life. They don't require changing or recalibration every 18 months or 2 years or so, as you might expect with a typical gas sensor. I'll talk a little bit about regulation, which is a difficult but very important topic. To date, today, there are no regulatory requirements for off-gas or electrolyte vapor detection anywhere within the globe. So we are reliant upon third-party bodies to do testing and advocate for its use. Regulations are coming, and forgive the way I phrase this, we as a kind of line tamer group, if you'll excuse that phrase too, we're spending an awful lot of time and money on coaxing standards and regulations out of the required bodies, but unfortunately regulations often tend to be a little bit behind technology as it moves forward, so we've still got some way to go. But that being said, there are lots of very serious bodies, companies, third-party advocates for this technology and the advantages that it can give. And I'll reference just 3 or 4, maybe up to half a dozen in the next few slides. In no particular order of priority, DNV, GL in Norway have done a lot of testing with these electrolyte solvent vapor detection sensors, and have proved that it's possible to pull back a cell after gas is vented. And these are independent testing reports, which obviously I can provide. I've copied and pasted the link to it there, but I can provide, it's quite a large file, but I can provide that document should anybody wish it. UL also produced a test report last year highlighting the time difference between a cell beginning to vent and it reaching its point of thermal runaway, and talking about the technologies that could and should be used to intervene at that early stage. There are documents produced by the aforementioned Electrical Power Research Institute, again advocating early detection pre-thermal runaway, whatever the application, whether it is a BESS or whether it be a residential storage area or an electric vehicle car park. A Burns-McDonnell paper, again published late last year, also talks about the massive advantage of early warning, early intervention in a cell venting. Closer to home, for us in the UK at least, the Fire Industry Association produced a guidance document on lithium-ion battery fires, not just with regard to detection, but also with regard to other mitigating actions and suppression that could be incorporated. I'll hold my hand up here and just say that I'm not a suppression expert. I've had some exposure to some of the developments, but I'm not a suppression expert, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions in that area. But importantly, the FIA guide does talk about early intervention and early detection. Similarly, published only about a month ago, I think, or it might be 2 months, Euralarm published a very useful guidance document, again on the full gamut, the full range of detection and protection and suppression solutions for lithium-ion batteries in whatever application. Again, both those documents are freely available. They can be downloaded from the relevant websites, the FIA or Euralarm, or I'm happy to provide them. And they all help strengthen the safety case. So, repeating what I said earlier, lithium-ion batteries do an absolutely fantastic job. They're going to be here to stay and used in an ever-growing number of applications. We just need to make sure that we're adopting the best, safest practices along the way, because the last thing we want is to certainly not have any, we want to have as few or no instances as we can, but we don't want to turn people off the technology and the benefits that they provide. My job over the last year has been promoting this technology. Obviously, I hold my hand up and freely admit that. And it's been an extremely busy year. The interest is, again, it's growing exponentially, a bit like the predicted rise of lithium-ion batteries, particularly in energy storage. We've started to see insurance companies demanding it, end users mandating it, writing into their specifications. It's a growing business, and regulations are not just likely pending, they are coming. It will be technology, maybe in the end not just ours but other technologies that can provide early intervention are going to be key to keeping the whole industry as safe as it possibly can be. If I pause on this slide in the next one, I just three things that I would just ask you to really bear in mind. Allies the fact that, you know, lithium-ion batteries, fantastic and here to stay, but to date, the vast majority of them are not guaranteed to be perfect. And if we understand, you know, the kind of 4 states of failure, from the abuse, whatever it may be, let's say a charging or a temperature issue, through to a release then of some electrolyte vapor, then we get to smoke, and then fire. I really want to focus in on obviously on that electrolyte vapor release stage. And if we do that, we can help prevent thermal runaway and avoid the fire, smoke, damage and explosion that potentially can occur thereafter. We've again spent a lot of time producing as much documentation as we think people can handle, perhaps maybe too much. Again, I can provide it, or alternatively, if you access the Extralis website, we've got a mass of documentation, from white papers, design guides, case studies, user manuals, competitive testing, which is the next few slides. I'm going to cover that, but almost anything and everything to try and help as much as we can to educate as many people as we can. So I have just 2 or 3 slides here that I've cut out from a much larger file of a lot of testing that we've done. We've tested literally hundreds of batteries under different test conditions over several years. And here, whilst we're only testing 3 different battery types, we've tested with 4 different detection technologies to fully understand not just the performance of our electrolyte vapor line tamer detection, but also where other technologies will appear in that detection cycle. So, excuse me, we tested obviously our own line tamer. We tested again our own VESDA very early smoke detection apparatus. We tested another manufacturer's aspirating smoke detector, and we also then tested in against our own Honeywell commercial electrochemical catalytic gas detectors. So I'm getting a slight frog in my throat. I do apologize. The test setup, and again, it's, you know, it's a file, a complete file that I can send you with pictures and more data. It covers, we set up 2 different sets of tests. One is to simulate in a battery container. The other we describe as a kind of open space test, but that could be replicated, let's say, in a car park area, anywhere where a lithium-ion cell under stress, starting to vent, and we're testing sensing in that area. 3 different battery types. in terms of form factor, so cylindrical, prismatic and pouch, 2 cathode chemistries, NMC and LFP, stressing again that we've done this with almost any battery that we can get our hands on. This is just one example. And I have 2 or 3 slides here just to indicate the results from the test. So the one example here is a setup of technologies in a battery rack. We have an NMC chemistry battery, cylindrical form, and this test was overheat as per UL 9540A test conditions. What it proved here, and obviously was no surprise to me, was that the line tamer, that's represented by this grey line here, it detected the electrolyte vapor release 9 minutes before the battery reached its thermal runaway point. Now, obviously, in normal conditions, what I would be recommending, the moment the line tamer produces its alarm signal, the power is taken off from the battery and probably some ventilation, extra ventilation is started, and that battery does not reach its thermal runaway point. But obviously here we were testing to ensure that the battery did indeed reach its thermal runaway point, so we could work out the time difference. In exactly that same test, we have the VESDA very early VU smoke detector. We have the other manufacturers aspirating smoke detector, and they do pick up and detect an alarm, but both of them pretty much at the same point, at that thermal runaway point. So they're indicated by, I don't know how well the colors are coming across on the slideshow, but they're indicated by the orange line on the graph and the mid blue. They are picking up the battery failing, but 9 minutes after the line tamer electrolyte solvent vapor detector has operated. And actually, to me, this probably, and again stressing I can provide the data from all the other tests, this was the surprising point for me particularly, and maybe that shows showed my ignorance at that point more than anything. But the gas detectors, which hitherto I suppose I'd been conditioned to think would be sufficient to do the job, they only reacted again even slightly after the thermal runaway point. So I have the carbon dioxide detector, carbon monoxide and the hydrogen all reacting, but again 9 minutes after that early indication of the electrolyte vapor release. And the last slide here is just a kind of summary of those 3 tests that were conducted. And you'll notice here that I wasn't necessarily doing myself down, but the example that I showed was a 9-minute advantage from the line tamer technology over the other detection technologies. But in the other 2 examples that we published, and again I've got the data and the graphs, the early warning was anything up to 25 minutes warning, which to me is an absolutely significant advantage of early warning, early detection to help in the safety of lithium-ion batteries. And at that point, I will finish my official presentation. I'm very take any questions.
Thanks, Justin. That was really, really interesting. It's great to know the technology that's there for early detection, especially when we're assessing buildings with battery packs in them. We do have some questions on request for test reports. I see that you gave your email address, so you're happy for people to contact you for any questions or documents.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. And on your slide, you did share some of the links for test sheets. I do have another question just come in. How sensors will be located and mitigating actions triggered in parking garages?
Okay, it's a really good question, because we've done a lot of testing, and this probably won't be a surprise to anybody who's really studied it. The problem at the moment with garages is they're going to always have a mix of electric vehicles and ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles. So you're going to end up with a real cocktail of pollutants, one of a better phrase. I'll be 100% honest. Today, the sensing technology that we have, it's problematic. We get too many false alarms if you have a mix of electric vehicles and ordinary, let's say, diesel or petrol vehicles in. However, by the end of this year, we will have upgraded the technology so that we can provide line tamer sensors in I call it a mixed car park. But it's going to be the end of this year, I think, before we would happily deploy it. I could put it in today, but we get too many false alarms, which should be no help to anybody.
Brilliant, thank you. John Alexander, you're killing me with that question. I might have to send this one to you in an email because it is pretty long. Let me just see the last one. Are you aware of any vehicle manufacturers that have vapor detection systems built into their hybrid or electric vehicles?
Short answer is yes. Two that I'm aware of, neither of whom will allow me to say so. And I know that sounds really unhelpful. One has done it already, one is doing it. Again, I would hope that next year, at least one of them will allow us to talk about it.
Okay, so basically watch this space. We're going to have some more on car parks.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent nearly 3 years working with one particular car manufacturer. You know, it's a known issue. Obviously, we all see it fairly regularly, although I should say that petrol diesel cars cause more fires or have more fires than electric vehicles. According to the actual facts and the data, they're just not as interesting or gather as much publicity, but they are actually safer, but more dramatic. I think that's the issue.
Okay, great. I know you said that the sensors had a 10-year life, but is there any maintenance required for the system?
I could definitely say no, but what we ask is like an annual health check. But actually, physically, there's very little to do. I mean, obviously, if it was in a slightly polluted area, we might look at cleansing of the sensor heads, but there's no recalibration required. There's no changing of sensors, which you would have to do with a different technology, but with a gas detector, where you'd need, because the pillister needs changing every couple of years. I'm trying to read some of the questions.
They're all coming in at the end, thick and fast.
Okay, well, I can have a go at some of them.
We've got, do you have any data on false negative rates of the system?
Okay, do you have any data on false negatives? Well, by putting in the reference sensors, we don't get false alarm. I haven't got any data that I could share with you to say how many times does a reference sensor pick something up and therefore we don't get an alarm, but that's because it's doing its job, I think. That's a really hard question to answer, because defining it will be really tricky. If whoever asked that question wanted to write, I'll happily share the answer with everybody, but there isn't one quick answer to that. Yes, it has been used in the aerospace industry by one or two enlightened parties, but not in any major way. And I think the industry as a whole currently is reluctant to do too much transportation of lithium-ion cells in the air. Let's have a look. 9 minutes warning, it varies. Hopefully you picked it up right at the end of the presentation. Different batteries, different chemistries, different manufacturers, different applications, different, all sorts of things, different conditions can produce a different result. The only thing that I can say is in every test that we've ever done, the worst warning was 5 minutes and the best warning 25 minutes. So it's anywhere in between those two. Can it be retrofitted? Yes, absolutely. This is a slight guess. I would think that probably nearly half now of what we've been doing has been retrofitting much earlier installations that have realized that they didn't take safety quite as seriously as they should have done. So probably half now of what we do is existing installations. Cost, that's an interesting one. I was waiting for that one. It's a slightly general answer, but hopefully it gives you some idea. The shipping container with 30 racks that I showed earlier in the presentation, if I use that as an example with that many sensors and a couple of controllers, and if you forgive me if I talk in US dollars, because if I always talk in dollars and I never make a mistake, that would be about $15,000 cost of kits to provide the protection for that that energy storage container. And forgive me, I think that is cheap at 12 times the price to provide that level of protection and detection and stop the kind of things that we've seen. There must be consideration into the ratio between petrol, diesel vehicles to hybrid or EV. David, I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll try and answer it. If you're talking about car parking, then yeah, that's the issue that we've come across, and we've done a lot of testing. Actually, we've got a system live but not operational in a car park in Rotterdam, which we're using as our base in Europe to test underground car parks. Because it allows all vehicle types in, it just creates too many false positives, false alarms, and until we get we are going to do, we're going to upgrade the sensing technology so that it can filter out, let's say, diesel or petrol particles properly. Unless somebody says, no, this is just EVs only, it's always going to be a problem. But by the end of the year, I'll be certain that we'll have the release of the sensing technology that'll do it. Any thoughts on types of suppression? I'm stressing again that I am not a suppression expert. All the data I read seems to indicate that water is the most reliable and the best suppression for lithium-ion batteries, but I am not an expert. I know people who are. If you want to ask me, I can point you in their direction. Jason, yes, good ironic question. Yes, a normal recommendation is for it to have some backup power in case of failure, but usually in the types of insulation that it's in, there is plenty of backup power available. The issue I had with data relating to car fires, we're comparing apples with fish. Yeah, Matthew, good question. If you write to me, I was reading it yesterday, and I'll find the link. it was an insurance company who had the data, and it was related to numbers of vehicles as well. So they'd got the proportions right, and pure EV was the least problematic. Hybrids were the most problematic, and ICE vehicles were somewhere in the middle. But pure EV proportionally caused the fewest amount of fires. So their data tells me. Stephen, good question. They could be. Again, from some of the testing we've done, some batteries, we have seen that when they're totally discharged, they do cause a problem. They do. It's nearly as bad as overcharging. I don't know how long I've got left here. Let me have a look. Will you be able to share the details of the line home setup? It's set up. Yeah, I mean, if you want to send me an email, I can provide the details, all sorts of details, and the setup and the test done. The comparative testing that I've talked about, I've got a file that I can share quite happily with anybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Justin. So just a reminder that your email address is justin.mcnamara@extralis.com.
Yeah, I'll type it in just so that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And also the recording will be available on our website, ifesouthern.co.uk, if you do want to watch it back or pass it on.
Just check and type that correctly. Yeah, there it is.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that, Justin. That was very informative.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay.